and you live very high. You lean on the wind when the breeze came by. Say to the wind as it took you away, that's where I wanted to go today.
Greetings, vinyl community, and welcome to VC Friday. 1967 was the watershed year for Jefferson Airplane. Equipped with a strong new frontwoman in Grace Slick and a strong new manager in Bill Graham, the previously struggling band rocketed into the top 10 of both the album and singles charts with Surrealistic Pillow, Somebody to Love, and White Rabbit. Now, although they had been already notable enough to be name-checked in a Donovan song in 1966, by 1967, in April, they received a visit from no less a luminary than Paul McCartney, who played them a tape of a song his little band was working on called A Day in the Life, and told them about a hot new guitarist who was making a lot of noise in England named Jimi Hendrix. Well, the Airplane were to find out just how hot and just how much noise when they shared bills in June with Jimi Hendrix at the Monterey Pop Festival and at the Fillmore. So the preview of Pepper and the experience of Hendrix surely gave the Airplane the impetus to up their psychedelic game for their next album. And that album would be the most psychedelic and most experimental in their whole catalog, After Bathing at Baxter's. Even before White Rabbit was released as a single, the band was already ensconced in RCA's Hollywood studios recording the follow-up to Surrealistic Pillow, with Al Schmitt as producer, Schmidt's brother Richie as engineer, and the band having access to 8-track tape technology for the first time, something they would take full advantage of to accommodate a lot of adventurous new ideas. The recording began in May of '67 and continued through the last day of October, with constant interruptions for the band's busy concert schedule. The band's base of operations during the recording sessions was a rented house in Beverly Hills once used by the Beatles. This, incidentally, being a year before the band purchased the famous Jefferson Airplane house at 2400 Fulton Street in San Francisco. While the recording of After Bathing at Baxter's was in progress, RCA wanted a single. Hoping to match the success of Somebody to Love and White Rabbit, both with lead vocals by Grace Slick, Bill Graham and Al Schmitt wanted Two Heads, also sung by Grace, to be the A-side. Grace herself objected to this, not wanting Jefferson Airplane to be regarded as just her backup band. So, in the end, Two Heads was relegated to the B-side, and the A-side was Paul Kantner's song, The Ballad of You and Me and Pooh Neal. Ballad of You and Me and Pooh Neal had been the first thing recorded for the album, with the initial version taped on May 22nd. That version was scrapped, and the band experimented with the idea of taking an 11-minute live performance and stripping off the vocals and recording new vocals in the studio. That version was also shelved, and a third try at the song was recorded on June 26th and 27th. That was the final version, and it was followed immediately by the recording session for Two Heads. The single was released in August, charting at a disappointing number 42 in Billboard, although Cashbox rated it at number 24. The finished album featured artwork by LA Free Press political cartoonist Ron Cobb, representing the band as a rickety World War I-era triplane built from one of San Francisco's landmark Victorian houses, flying over a consumer wasteland. The title, After Bathing at Baxter's, referred to the band's private code for tripping on LSD, probably derived from Grace Slick's friend Roy Baxter, at whose parties she was introduced to psychedelics. And you can see somebody's written on my copy. I try to keep it clean, but sometimes you just can't have nice things. And there is the album's inner spread. The album's inner sleeve featured doodles by the band members signed by Nosrafej Enalpria, which is Jefferson Airplane backwards, and the inner sleeve artwork caused friction with RCA, who declared that part of the drawing resembled a psychedelic cunt. This prompted Grace to demand how anyone would know what a psychedelic cunt looks like. Now, on second pressings of the album, such as the one I have, with the orange label, one corner of the inner sleeve is strangely cut off. And that is not to delete the psychedelic hoo-ha, but apparently to remove a face that is drawn under the large figure's foot. And I'd love to know the story behind that, but I've never found any reference to it. After Bathing at Baxter's was released on November 27th, 1967, and reached number 17 in the charts. The album's 11 songs, 12 if you count the Siamese twinned Won't You Try and Saturday Afternoon as 2 songs, are grouped into 5 mini-suites of 2 or 3 songs each. The first suite is titled Street Mass and comprises The Ballad of You and Me and Punil, A Small Package of Value Will Come to You Shortly, and Young Girl Sunday Blues. After Bathing at Baxter's opens with a wave of shimmering feedback that swells and quivers before giving way to the bouncing beat of the airplane in full flight, with Paul, Marty, and Grace all doing an intricate vocal dance around one another. There's a remarkable passage during the first bridge where Grace underpins Paul's lead vocal with the single word armadillo stretched into dozens of syllables, after which Marty just casually tosses off the word armadillo on his own. Jack Cassidy provides a weird, distorted bass solo that appears to be completely composed. He does basically the same solo on the live performance. And the whole thing culminates in a return to the feedback wash that began it, before segueing into the next track. And that title? Songwriter Fred Neil, whose The Other Side of This Life was a staple of the Jefferson Airplane's live set, was nicknamed Pooh Neil by Grace because he reminded her of Winnie the Pooh. In keeping with the Pooh theme, Paul Kantner incorporates verses from 3 A.A. Milne poems into the lyrics of the ballad. Pooh Neil would reappear, complete with further A.A. Milne quotation, on the next album's apocalyptic closer, The House at Pooh Neil Corner.
Man is an island!
The last thing recorded for After Bathing at Baxter's, on Halloween as it happens, was A Small Package of Value Will Come to You Shortly, Spencer Dryden's percussion and harpsichord collage with spoken chatter, screams, and raspberries contributed by band associates Bill Thompson and Gary Blackman. Like the Rolling Stones' Sing This All Together, See What Happens, which I talked about recently, the track clearly owes a debt to Frank Zappa's The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet, from Freak Out in particular. Both the Stones and the Airplane tracks even include Christmas messages, so nice connection there. Where the Stones ended their freak out with an electronic "We Wish You a Merry Christmas," Spencer's piece is bisected by Tubular Bells playing "Joy to the World." The title was found in a fortune cookie.
Don't you know what I have found? Maybe you found it too.
After being the dominant songwriter on the Jefferson Airplane's first two albums, Marty Balon was starting to find himself at odds with the rest of the band, both personally and artistically. And Young Girl's Sunday Blues, co-written with Paul Kantner, is Marty's only songwriting contribution to After Bathing at Baxter's. The band repeated the experiment that they had tried with The Ballad of You and Me and Pooh Neal by recording the track live at the Fillmore and adding studio overdubs. So that is what features on the album. This is a live track with studio overdubs. Marty contributes a soulful lead vocal. Jorma Kaukonen contributes a Baroque guitar solo. And the whole thing, I think, has a certain kinship with Marty's 3/5 of a mile in 10 seconds from the previous album. The second suite on After Bathing at Baxter's is The War Is Over, comprising Martha and Wild Time, both written by Paul Kantner, who very much took up the songwriting slack as Marty withdrew.
What a great thing to be free.
Martha is a delicate acoustic ode to Martha Wax, a teenage runaway who became part of the Airplane circle and who happened to be the daughter of the mayor of Sausalito. Paul's nimble acoustic fingerpicking is joined by subdued but razor-edged electric guitar by Jorma and soft recorder warbling from Grace. There are marvelous harmonized vocals from Grace, Paul, and Marty with brilliant use of dynamics. Jorma contributes a raga rock guitar solo, and at the end the instrumentation seems to crumble and drop out entirely as Paul sings the last lines in a plaintive a cappella.
I'm here for you any old time.
Wild Time is a joyful rock and roll track with bold vocals celebrating doing things that haven't got a name yet. Jorma's guitar again displays the influence of Indian raga, and the title appears to be an elaborate pun. Surely the wild time is the time that the Airplane was living through in 1967, but the Y substituting for an I, and also that parenthetical H, suggests the Byrds, and their recording of Wild Mountain Time might have something to do with what was going through Paul's head when he wrote this song. Side 1 concludes with the third suite, Hymn to an Older Generation, comprising Jorma's The Last Wall of the Castle and Grace's Rejoice.
So please, don't jump so soon.
Jorma's contribution to After Bathing at Baxter's is the album's hardest rocking track, with Jorma taking the lead vocal and contributing heavy blues-bustin' guitar and an instrumental break that sounds like squealing brakes and smashing metal. The lyrics are an apology to a lover for straying, but the lines that stand out sound more philosophical. Understanding is a virtue hard to come by. You can teach me how to love if you only try.
I've got his arm. I've got his arm. I've had it for weeks.
Grace Slick's two songwriting contributions to Baxter's are much deeper, darker, and weirder than anything else on the album. and both are masterful examples of arch song. The first of them ends side 1, Rejoyce, all lowercase. And again we're seeing a Y substitute for an I in the title, this time making a reference to author James Joyce and his book Ulysses, whose characters Stephen Dedalus, Molly Bloom, and Blazes Boylan all appear in the lyrics. The line, "I'd rather have my country die for me," is almost a direct quote from Ulysses. The actual line spoken by Stephen Dedalus in the book is, "I say, let my country die for me." The guitarists sit this one out as Grace sings solo, accompanied by her own ruminative piano, sensitive and complex bass and drums from Jack and Spencer, and a group of studio wind players, including a wonderful snake-charming oboe part and some fiery jazz flute at the end. There's also a harpsichord which may be played by Grace or by Spencer or by another studio musician. White Rabbit was said to have been inspired by Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain, and I think that influence can be felt here as well. The fourth suite is punningly titled How Sweet It Is, and consists of Paul's Watch Her Ride and the improvised jam Spare Change.
I didn't know you were the one for me. I couldn't see, but you were waiting.
Watch Her Ride with Martha on the Flip was the second single released from After Bathing at Baxter's. It reached number 61 in Billboard, but number 37 according to Cashbox. None of the Airplane's future singles would fare any better until they reinvented themselves as Jefferson Starship, but that's a very different story. The song has the same cheerful, rocking feel as Punil and Wild Time. It's full-on electric rock, but something about the rhyme scheme and the metrical construction of the verses makes me think of a couple of folk rock classics that had been released the previous year, specifically the associations Along Comes Mary and Simon and Garfunkel's Hazy Shade of Winter. Oddly, that's something that I hear slightly in Jorma's song, The Last Wall of the Castle, as well. Unlikely, but that's how I hear it. Recorded on October 31st, alongside Spencer's A Small Package of Value, the longest track on Bathing at Baxter's is a trio improvisation featuring just Jack, Jorma, and Spencer. Although the band had been energized, and particularly Jack and Jorma, by seeing Cream at the Fillmore, the sparse and sensitive interplay among the Airplane trio couldn't be more different from the frenetic jams of the English group. The track begins with Jack exploring the high range of his bass and Jorma playing feedback drones. Spencer carefully insinuates himself with some gentle cymbal taps, but soon withdraws as Jack and Jorma seem to need to sound each other out musically. Jack strums some full chords on the bass, trying to coax Jorma out of his shell. He seems a bit reticent at first, but soon enough everyone is able to cut loose, and the whole thing, again, has something of the structure of Indian raga, with the slow beginning and everyone able to build in intensity towards the end. The last of the 5 suites is Schizo Forest Love Suite, comprising Grace's Two Heads and Paul's Won't You Try Saturday Afternoon. There's an inconsistency in the spelling of the word schizoforest. It has a C on the label, but no C on the handwritten titles inside the album cover, so it seems to say Schizoforest. I think schizo was intended, but the shizo spelling is found on most later pressings. What are you going to do?
want two heads on your body.
Grace's second contribution to Baxter's is every bit as weird and creative as the first, but whereas Rejoyce had been moody and languid, Two Heads comes out blazing, with Grace's full-throated voice belting over a naughty rhythmic pattern of staccato acoustic guitar chops and choked-off cymbal hits. Grace plays a Baldwin electric piano which contributes to the menacing and mechanical vibe, and the clarion verses alternate with eerie bridge sections where Grace continues to reel off dazzlingly surreal lyrics while a distant and electronically altered background voice croons about reflections and green Volkswagens. The whole thing ends with a coda of two overdubbed Graces wailing in stereo and a final cymbal crash echoing off into the sunset. If there is a more psychedelic 3 minutes and 10 seconds, I don't know that I've ever heard it. And how anyone would have considered this as a single is beyond me.
I will give you caps of blue and silver sunlight for your hair.
The album ends on a bittersweet note with Paul Kantner's double-barreled tribute to the human be-in of January 1967, the so-called Gathering of the Tribes in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, which provided a focus for the city's counterculture movement and led to the Summer of Love. But by the album's November release date, the song could serve only as a wistful farewell to the innocence and idealism that had originally fueled the movement before the hard drugs and the hangers-on moved in and things began to sour. Paul provides a wonderful encapsulation of the optimism of the burgeoning hippie movement in the lovely phrase, acid, incense, and balloons. In Wild Time, Paul told us, changes, I see changes, all around me are changes. In Watch Her Ride, he sang, times don't ever change for me. But now he sings, times can change. It's what I say is true, all is real, and I'll come through for you. There's also a lovely moment of studio verite where Paul can be heard telling Jorma off mic, keep going. So keep going. And that's After Bathing at Baxter's. And it is my favorite Jefferson Airplane album. So thanks very much for watching. Be well. I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
He's a peninsula.